Well, welcome to Kings. It's fantastic to see you here today, and thanks for joining our Vision Sunday. The purpose of a Vision Sunday is predominantly to look back. It is to give thanks for what God has done, maybe in this last year, or particularly I want to look over the last couple of decades, and to just be so grateful as a people for God's faithfulness towards us. And at the same time, it gives me the opportunity as the senior pastor of Kings just to share with you some of the kind of key directional calls that the elders are making on behalf of this local church. So look, thanks for being here, and I hope you enjoy this message. In fact, this last year has been another strong year at Kings, and many highlights. So do you remember the teaching series on the Holy Spirit in the autumn term, which really was just so powerful, leading into another remarkable 21 days of prayer, and then the big jump to 2 meetings at Lee and changing the times on our Catford site. Both went superb, really could have gone better, and the church has continued to be really healthy. It's grown numerically again, probably up about 10% on this time last year. So very encouraged by that, literally with tens, hundreds of new people looking in. I'm very grateful again for the generosity of the church. I'm going to be looking to you again to go again in our giving review. Thanks to those of you that already ticked the box saying, yeah, I'm going to increase my giving by at least £20 a month. Thank you for doing that. Let's really press into God and honour God with our finances. So there's just so much to be grateful for. But on this occasion, I do want to I want to look back a bit further. As I've been preparing for this day and this moment, I've been reflecting on not just this last year, but really the 29 years that I've been leading this church. I found this picture again. It's very familiar if you've been in the church for any length of time. It's a picture of Deb and I with 2 of our young sons at the time. We had a third who's a real Londoner, Sam, born in Lewisham Hospital. But we moved in 1995 as a young family with a 3-year-old and a 6-month to take on what was a struggling church. It's such a long time ago. And for many of you, you've joined the church in a growing and expanding season. But when we first came, it really was quite hard. We were in one building. It was fairly run down. We inherited a fabulous group of 150, couple hundred people. But it took a real long while to kind of recover God's people and ultimately to recover the facility that we refurbed or developed in 2000. And so it's been quite a story. It's been a remarkable story of God's faithfulness to us as a people year after year. I remember things like 4 weeks in, a group of prophets visiting from the vineyard and sharing a vision with us through a prophetic word that we should look in our history. And in our history, there is a vision to be recovered. And we did that. We found out that this church was planted out of Spurgeon's ministry by a 22-year-old and had been planted with a vision for 1,000 people. And that became the primary directive word to Kings, probably for the first 15 to 20 years of me being the pastor here. And then we had another word, which I shared in around 2013, 2014, about God had called Kings to be like Niagara Falls, but it had a wider vision, which we summarise as Vic Falls. And that's really been the predominant prophetic word over us as a community, that we should continue to build strong, but have a wide vision. And what I'm going to share in a moment, I believe, is the ongoing fulfillment of that prophetic word, just taking it to a next stage. But before I get into that, let's turn to the scriptures. What I'd like to do today is to go to the book of Acts. I'm going to look at Acts 13. This is probably a familiar passage for us if you come to Kings for any length of time. We've always endeavoured to take this New Testament model church and say, could we become like this church? I mean, we'll never make it. It's a remarkable church, but we've always kind of endeavoured to reach towards it. And today I want to return to it. And I'm going to read from Acts 13, 1 to 3. Now, in the church at Antioch, there were prophets and teachers. So immediately we see the different types of leadership gifts, as Barnabas, Simeon called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, Manaen, who had been brought up with Herod the Tetrarch, and Saul. And while they were worshipping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, "Set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work for which I have called them." And so after they had fasted and prayed, they placed their hands on them and sent them off. Familiar words to many of us. This is a great church. It's an urban church. It's a base church, like an apostolic base church. It was started by persecuted Christians fleeing Jerusalem, but as they went, they just told people about Jesus. The Jerusalem church heard about it and they sent one of their top guys, Barnabas. He was sent by the apostles. He arrives. You see this in Acts 11. He sees the favour of God, the grace of God upon them, and he realises to strengthen this local church, he needs help. He's going to need other gifts. And so he goes to get Saul, who's a little bit, he's been hidden for a number of years, and he goes and gets him. And Saul comes, and together they lead this church. And we have a list here of the leaders of the church. There's also very diverse leadership. And that's one of the things I love about Kings. Over these last 29 years, we really have become a church that is all ages and stages, from young babies to people in their 90s, full of people that are married and full of people that are single. It's just full of people that work in the city and have more money than me, and others that really are just about getting by. And that's one of the things I love about Kings, the diversity in so many ways. And here we see a diverse leadership team. And I just want to take the opportunity to draw to your attention some of the key leaders here at Kings. Firstly, our elders. Obviously, I'm an elder. I'm married to Deb. And then we have Ozzy, married to Andrea, Ernest and Hazel, Andrew and Rachel Wilson, and Kwaku and Lucy. They are our existing elders. And I want to recommend two new elders to you, Joe and Tristan. They have been on staff for a number of years. You know them well. And maybe just over a year ago, I think maybe this time last year, I said, look, we want to make them associate pastors. And in our mind, this was all a part of their development to join our eldership team. And so I'm recommending them to you. Our plan is to lay hands on them in the 21 days of prayer that we're going to do in January. So we're planning on the Wednesday evening, the 8th. So, start penciling that in. But I'm bringing them to you and I'm asking you to speak to me if you know of any reason why they shouldn't become elders. For example, it's not if you don't like them or you don't know them very well. We're a very large church, but you know something about them that you feel disqualifies them from eldership. They lose their temper a lot. They're always getting drunk. I need something substantial, not just like, well, he walked past me and didn't say hello the other day. I need something substantial. I'm not expecting that, but it's one of the ways we ensure that those that are elders really represent our community. And so speak to me or any of the other elders. What I really like is the church to say, great, Steve, we know these men, we're totally with you. I do have to say to you that there is one concern I have about both of them, that they're both West Ham fans. And yeah, I know, that troubles me as well. And I think does raise some questions around their judgment. But unfortunately, I can't find scriptural reference for that disqualifying them. So we may just have to carry that burden. But no, seriously, this is an important moment. And please speak to us and hopefully we'll move forward. I also want to just remind you about the trustees of King's Church London. We take governance very seriously here. We have a monthly trustees meeting. I attend and give an account and a report to the trustees. And we just want to make you of a key change we're making with our trustees, which I've mentioned before. But Ozzy, who's also one of our elders, is actually the new chair of trustees. Simon Linley, who has served the church faithfully in multiple roles, is actually standing down from the chair of trustees. I'm hoping I've asked him to stay on for a couple of years to continue to serve as a trustee, and he's considering that. And then the other trustees are Kwaku, Ao, Roberta, and William. You'll know William. Obviously, William and Hilary recently moved on. but I asked William, would he be good enough to just continue to serve for a couple of years? And he said yes. And we're looking at bringing one or two other trustees in. So I just wanted to update you on that. You probably picked up as I'm sharing that we're also planning to do 21 days of prayer in January again. We see in the Antioch church that they were a praying community, and so that's a really key moment in the life of Kings, 21 days of prayer. In Acts 13, we also see key transitional points of leadership, and I just want to draw them to your attention before I go and share some really important news with you. Acts 13 marks a moment of transition in leadership in this local church. Barnabas and Saul are sent out. They came, sent by the apostles in Jerusalem. Barnabas gets Paul, they come and they're there for a couple of years and they establish this church, and then they have this Holy Spirit moment where they are released from the leadership of the local church and they go on their first missionary journey. They've got a vision beyond just a local church. I feel that's in us. We've got a vision to build a great local church, but we have a vision that as wide as Vic Falls to bless many in many different parts of the world. And then if we read on, if we had time, we read on, you then observe a transition in the leadership of this apostolic team. It starts with Barnabas leading, and then suddenly in the middle of Acts it changes and it's not Barnabas and Paul, it becomes Paul and Barnabas. And for a while there's a little bit of an interchange because depending on the context, so when they're in Acts 15 at the Council of Jerusalem, it's actually Barnabas that speaks first, because obviously Barnabas had a real relationship with the Jerusalem apostles because he was sent from them. But you see this team that transitions, so it transitions from leading a local church and is released from that responsibility, and then you see transition in the apostolic team, Barnabas leading, and then ultimately Paul leading. And then the last thing you see here is that this is a team and leaders that stay relationally connected with their sending church. So in Acts 14, when they return from their first missionary journey, they come back to the Antioch church and they share the news of all that God has done. And I just wanted to establish those kind of three principles out of this passage because I think it will help us in light of what I want to share with you now. In 2018, during my last sabbatical, I had the privilege of visiting two great churches in the States. I went to Mike Fletcher's church called Manor Church in North Carolina. It's a big church, 8,000, a number of sites and venues, and I've really gone to try and learn more about how to lead a multi-site church. Deb and I then went down to see Greg Surratt at Seacoast. It's a big church, 15,000 with 15 sites. And while we were there, we observed something that we weren't really looking for, but it was of great interest to us. And that we found that both these great leaders had handed over their church to a younger leader as they hit their 60s. I think Mike was 60 and Greg was 62. I'm 61. And what they'd done is they'd hand over to a next generation leader, but they had stayed on team and they really had backstop or coached or supported the next generation leader through. And I found that fascinating. In 2019, I shared it with the elders. So May 2019, so over 5 years ago. We've been discussing this for a long time, building to this key moment in our story, our journey as kings. And I shared with them that I felt that we should start talking about the succession plan. I'd heard at Seacoast that good succession transitional planning takes 10 years, not 5. I found that really helpful. And we've been discussing eldership and trustees and senior staff for a number of years, what I'm going to announce in a moment. When we were discussing it, we looked at a whole range of options. Should we take Kings and go from being one church with 4 venues to 4 autonomous churches? And we just say we release all the churches. And for a while we were really considering that, but ultimately in the end we felt God spoke to us that we should stay together. And so we said we're going to stay together. We're going to look for a next generational leader to emerge. with the full support of the elders and the apostolic oversight of this church, says I'm going to release it maybe a little earlier than I originally planned, but stay around and, in a sense, support and help the transition through. And in light of that, I'm delighted to tell you that the elders of Kings, about a year ago, approached Joe Magnamara and said, would you become the lead pastor of Kings? And Joe and Sylvia and others prayed and they talked for a number of months, and I'm delighted to say that he came back and said yes. Joe is an outstanding next generational leader. He has got a proven track record amongst us and also already has been recognised by people beyond Kings. You don't stand in front of 9,000 young people at New Day and hold their attention if you haven't got something about you, and Joe's got something about him. He's also done his theological training. He's shown his experience in pastoral and leadership as he's led our Downham site, and I'm delighted that I can commend him to you. Just to help you, just a little timeline for you. So I did my sabbatical in September 2018, and then in May 2019, I shared with the elders our first conversation about this. I'll go into more detail about this on the Vision Night next Wednesday because I don't have time to go into all the detail. And I'm announcing today that from September 25, so a year's time, you haven't got rid of me yet, from a year's time, that Joe will become the lead pastor in September 25. At that point, I will stand down as senior pastor of Kings, but I'll remain on the eldership. I'll still be around. What I'll predominantly do is lead New Frontiers, which is our global family and the fellowship that I'm responsible for. So Deb and I will still be around. We're hoping in the church there may be not a lot of difference, but I'll still be around. I'll just be a little bit more in the background. I'm planning, with Joe's full agreement, to attend all the elders meetings and expect to be on the eldership and the senior leadership team for a number of years going forward. In fact, we're probably thinking up to 6 more years. So through this coming year, I will continue to be senior pastor of Kings, and I'll just work with Joe and the team. And then from September 25, Joe will become lead pastor. We decided to change the title. He's going to be the lead pastor. He will lead the church. He will lead the eldership. He will lead the staff. He will be speaking at Vision Sunday. He will be leading, and I will step back and just encourage, coach, support. And therefore, from September 25, we'll go Joe with Steve and team. And then in September 28, as he grows into the role, it will be Joe with team. And then I'm probably going to stay on the eldership but step off in 2031. By that time, I'll be 68 and Joe will be 38. Now, look, I'm realising this is raising probably a whole load of questions. It's probably a mixture of emotions. So far, where we shared this news, there's been a bit of sadness because, oh gosh, we're just kind of used to Steve, and we've had such a remarkable, what will be 3 decades by the time I hand over. And then there's been a bit of excitement about, a next generational leader. This we can still take ground together. And I think the future's very bright. And I think it's appropriate probably to feel a bit of both at the moment. So there you have it. That's the news from this Vision Sunday. And I would like to invite you to the Vision Night on Wednesday, where I'll go into more detail and you can make comment and ask any questions you have. And now what we're going to do is we're going to show you a video interview. This is an interview that Andrew Wilson sort of chairs, and there's Deb and I and Joe and Sylvia, and we just recorded this so that you could hear a little bit more of the background, the story, and some of our hopes and plans as we implement this transition over the next few years. I hope you enjoy it, and I'm asking you, Kings, to really get behind Joe and support him as he comes through over the next year to lead this great church. I'm very grateful for your faithfulness in serving God and following my leadership, and I'm asking to follow my leadership into this again, and I'm very optimistic about the future. There's many thousands of people to be reached in this part of London, and there is a big global world that we need to serve, and that's what I've shared with you today, and I hope it resonates and you can sense, yeah, amen, God is in this. Let's watch the interview.
Okay, well, welcome everybody. It's good to be with you. We've just heard some big news for the future of the church and for our lives together as a family and as a people. And it's great to be together as a group with Steve and Deb Tibbert and with Joe and Sylvia Magnamara, partly just to talk through this whole thing, really, get a sense of what's behind it, what the backstory is, how everyone feels about it, and to give a little bit more content, really, so to fill out some of the details. Steve, the best is probably some people may not have already heard the news. So could you just summarise the story that you've just been telling and publicly in the church and how we've got here?
Yeah, well, it's big news. Obviously, just announced that from next September, Joe will become lead pastor of Kings. And so that's a decision you don't take lightly. But it's something that, we've been discussing eldership for a number of years. I mean, as I reflect on it, Andrew, I don't know what you think about it, Joe, I'm obviously reflecting on the last, what would be 30 years of leading this church. We came as a young family from Bedford to London, and we've just seen the faithfulness of God. I mean, it really has been a remarkable journey, and we've literally seen, thousands of people come through, many stay, many go on, and it's just been quite a remarkable journey. Particularly over these last couple of years, I found it increasingly demanding to do the dual role of leading Kings, which is a great church. It needs focused leadership, and I've been trying to do our best. We love the church, but also, if you get close to us, you'll know that the demands and opportunities and privilege of serving our global family, New Frontiers, also is it's a pretty big job. And so I think it was just a couple of years ago, I talked with the elders and I said, I just don't think this is sustainable. Yeah. It's not good for me, and ultimately it might not be good for the church and even the wider family. So that's kind of a bit of the background. Obviously, by the time I hand over, I'll be 62, maybe slightly earlier than I originally thought, but I'm very at peace at the timeline. And all pastors are passing through. And so it's important to really invest in the next generation. I actually feel what we're going to do now is also ongoing fulfilment of the key prophetic word over us. Kings is like Niagara Falls. It's a very strong local church, but it has a wider call. Not just me, but the whole church. We are called to play our part in serving particularly our global movement. So that is also another, for me, is an exciting fulfilment of what God's called us to do. And I think we've seen Joe, a very gifted, able leader, needs to lead his own church, and we're delighted it's going to be this one. He's one of our own. He's kind of grown up from within. I think any of us who work closely with him, or if you've experienced his preaching, his leadership, you can see God's call upon him. So we're really excited about you guys coming through and looking forward to sort of partnering with you. Obviously, this will still be our base. So we'll be staying here. Actually, for many in the church, it may not be a great amount of difference. We'll still be around on Sundays. We may travel a little bit more, but we do quite a lot of that already. So that's kind of, that's why we're here today. Yeah. And I'm actually very excited about the future. I think with Joe's gift and just his focus, I think the church could actually pick up pace and in a good way.
Yeah. It's nice what they said about you.
It is kind, yeah. No, and we're really glad that Steve and Deb are staying around. I kind of said that from the get-go, to have just their experience, wisdom, support, is amazing for us to have Steve staying on as an elder and the first few years even staying on the staff team, and just being involved is kind of quite crucial for us, and just a blessing to have them sticking around. It's a no-brainer really, and we're really pleased about it, just to kind of partner together for the next few years.
Yeah. There was a big thing for you, because you've been here 30 years as well, and raised your whole family here, and like that. How it must feel like a complicated thing for you as well. How do you feel about it? What's the experience even of the last couple of years been like for you?
Well, like Steve, I feel very much at peace about it, very positive about it. I mean, it has been an amazing journey since we came here 29 years ago. I think I was only just turned 30, which is, goodness me. We just had 2 young boys at the time, and I think the church was about 150 people. And since then, we've seen the church grow to what it is now, you know, multi-site church on 4 sites with multiple meetings. And I think along the way, we have just formed great community, found great friendships. We've met some remarkable people and served alongside them in those years. And our boys as well, you know, they've grown up and flourished here. Each of them has become a Christian and been baptised here. 2 of them found their wives here, you know, and got married. So it has been an amazing journey for us as a family. All that said, the last few years, as Steve has been increasingly called out, and inevitably I'm kind of joined in that with him. You know, we're out of Kings far more than was previously the case. And I think we felt a real tension there, and we've often felt that it's not sustainable, that we're not able to give Kings the kind of energy and focus that it needs. So it has been a challenge at times, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And as Steve said, we do feel that, you know, we're now moving into what we feel is a prophetic call upon Kings and on us as a couple, which is why it's just so fantastic to be sort of handing the reins over to Joe as lead pastor with Sylvia alongside him. And, you know, they're a fantastic young couple, and Sylvia, and we've had the joy of getting to know each other a bit more over the years, haven't we? I mean, they're both passionate for Jesus. They love God, they love his church, they have a delightful young family. You'll probably know, people know Joe far more from his upfront role preaching, but Sylvia is also really gifted herself, and they're just a great couple. It's true, it is true. So I think we feel very much at peace, and as Steve says, quite excited about what the future holds. Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant.
That's it.
And we're going to talk a bit next week with both of you as well about your stories and introduce you a bit more as well. But Steve, I think it also just, you've made it clear that you're not going anywhere. You're not disappearing into puff of smoke. And sometimes that's what happens. Sometimes people hand over and then they go. And obviously that's not how it's going to work. And I think with very good reason. But could you talk through a little bit about how's it going to work? Because that you're not vanishing, but so how's this sort of partnership overlap transition? As you say, I know we don't always know how everything's going to pan out, but how do you see that working out?
Well, we hope it's going to work. I think we've got a really good chance. I think we need a base. We are committed to Kings. We hope the church will pray and continue to support us as we serve outside. So we have no plans to move. And also what we want to do is really, support Joe and Sylvia in what this transition as Joe comes through, becomes lead pastor, and then, like I did when I first came and led a church, 30 plus years ago, it takes a while to grow into the role, and that's where we want to be, right alongside. I think we've been very clear, which would be our way of doing it if we've been in Kings any length of time. We're very clear, written down expectations of what is Joe's call, and I'll be more advisory. He's the leader from next September, but I'll stay on the eldership. Our latest chat is I'll still sit in all the senior leadership teams. I'll still be involved in some of the financial decisions in the background. But public ministry, I'll probably do even less. Obviously, you're still around, and there are other really gifted people on our team doing loads of things. So I think we'll be out more. We'll worship here on Sundays. I guess I'll occasionally anchor a meeting if that's needed or helpful. I probably will jump up and say something from time to time. But really, Joe will now become, in the year's time, he will become the leader of the church. He'll speak on Vision Sundays. He'll be casting the vision. He'll be leading the staff team. He'll be leading our eldership team. He'll be attending trustees and giving an account to them. And so that's a big shift. And mine will be a little bit more of a kind of, cheering on. And we already, it's even in the last year, since we've known this news is coming, nearly all decisions, Joe and I talk, we go for a walk up the park and grapple together. And I hope and expect we'll do that for a while. And then maybe in 3 or 4 years' time, I expect to fade even more and allow Joe to have, well, just no fade. I mean, I just
become smaller.
well, I don't know if that'll ever happen. But I think we just want to stand alongside them because it's a big church and it takes time for them to get known and things like that. So we just want to be supportive in that. I mean, I think in the end, honestly, if in the end we become a problem to the future of Kings, then we will make decisions in light of that, like we'll get out of the way. But we're hopeful and we're going to work hard to make it work. So yeah, that's our heart in it.
Yeah, brilliant. Oh, that is so helpful to hear, and I just thank you for just being so open. And as I said, in the next week's version of this conversation, we'll talk much more to you two, and these guys will be listening, which I guess would even represent some of the change that we're talking about. But thanks so much for sticking with us through this, and just hearing it out is just helpful, I think, because it is a big decision for all of us. It's just an important thing to talk through in some detail. So we're going to pause this conversation now, and then next week we'll come back and talk a bit more from the Magnamara side of things, exactly what that's going to mean for them and what it's going to mean for us collectively. And so hopefully we will, God willing, see you next week.